Now, in terms of the digital society, people often say, well, surely the online world is going to destroy all of that. Well, yes, it will, perhaps, but not quite as rapidly as you might think. For a start, many of these paper products have quite an emotional appeal, and they're very practical. You can touch them, you can write on them, you can scribble on them, you can tear bits out, you can pop them in your pocket. Paper does have advantages, which is why the so-called paperless office has been so long coming. In fact, if you look at surveys of email use and paper use in large companies worldwide over the last 10 years, you will see that paper use has actually increased rather than decreased in most of them. Strange? Well, the fact of the matter is that people print things out. They only print a very small proportion of their emails out, but as emails have gone through the roof in terms of volume, so paper has been surprisingly long-lasting. Now, set that against the Economist's prediction, which was that the only use of paper that will survive digital revolution perhaps would be Kleenex to blow your nose or to wipe your bottom when you go to the toilet. Well, quite honestly, I think that's wide of the mark. And when you look at the actual realities, you find that, as I say, paper has quite a strong emotional pull. And having said that, you look, for instance, at Yellow Pages and the directories industry, they're under pressure from people like Google Maps. If you look at direct mail and the rather mindless marketing of millions of people, again, that's under pressure in terms of cost and lowering response rates. But nevertheless, in those colour brochures, we see a clue to the future, which also is affecting the newspaper industry and has prevented or slowed down the otherwise catastrophic decline of readership. And that is the fact that people can read paper more quickly than a digital product. The reason for that is biological. In my eyes here, I have in each eye 3,000 billion characters of processing capacity every second. Now compare that to my ears, which are pathetic. They can only process 112,000 characters per second. And what that means is very simple. That if I was to speed up this tape, you would not be able to understand my speech at faster than around 120, 140 words per minute. The human brain cannot decode that amount of sound data. There's just not enough bandwidth in my ears. However, the optic nerve, which takes all this optical data from my eyes, streams vast amounts of unused bandwidth almost all of the time. And the fact is that a computer screen has only a tiny amount of bandwidth that it occupies. In my field of view, for a start, and even in that field of view, the resolution is small, the contrast is small, and you could do a simple test. Go and pick a copy of something like the Financial Times as a newspaper and divide 10 or 15 or 20 managers into two groups. They're university graduates who are well used to processing lots of information very quickly. Give one team the FT online. Actually, it's got to be the same number of pages, the same number of words. I don't care how you present it online, but it's got to be digitally accessed on their screen. And to the other team, give them the paper version, and you're going to give them a 5-minute test. And in 5 minutes, they have to produce a condensed summary on which they can be questioned about every aspect of what is in the paper that day. And you will see an astonishing difference in the productivity. You will find, on the whole, that those who read on the paper version, they've already got to the end of the paper in less than 60 seconds. They've marked it with a felt tip pen, they've ripped bits out, they've gone back, scanned in more detail the things that they thought were particularly interesting or relevant, and they've done it in less than 3 or 4 minutes. In comparison, the people on the screen are still scrambling around trying to read bits and pieces and hoping for the best. And that is why people print things out. If you look at the human cost, I'm not talking about the environmental cost, the human cost of reading a big report of maybe, say, 150 pages with graphs and tables, compared with the cost of scanning it on screen, there is no comparison whatsoever. The 100 pages, you've skipped the thing through, you've ripped out the 2 pages and taken them off to a meeting, and the rest has been dumped. I'm not saying it's environmentally friendly, but it's very efficient. And that's one of the reasons why books have done so well. The sheer physicality of a book makes it supremely readable, It's a very high definition source for the eye. It's very convenient. You can skip through it incredibly quickly. You can flick pages around, and it just, you can try reading a novel on an electronic book, but just look at the sales of electronic books, and please don't tell me it's anything to do with the high price. They're actually falling right now. Okay, so paper has this extraordinary capacity to deliver bandwidth to human beings, and that will continue for a very long time, despite all the advances that are being talked about for the next decade in terms of electronic paper, plastic bits of paper you can roll up, and so on.